All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Lauren Wobig here. Thanks for joining us this afternoon as we get ready for a tropical storm to come upon us. Maybe Trent can offer some more insights to that. I know it sounds like the East St. Louis area is probably going to take the brunt of the impacts from that storm. On today's agenda that Wes has up here, you can see there's a lot of legislative stuff involved, but that's not, I guess, unexpected because the state water plan does have a lot of legislative components to what that is by intent. So with that, why don't we just go ahead and get right into the agenda? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We need to do approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to the meeting minutes from?
And Lauren, I'll just make a comment that we did get some comments from Brian McCoy on the navigation section. So Brian, I have incorporated all of those comments into the meeting minutes. Was there any other comments or questions to the meeting minutes? Hearing no other comments, please either give a thumbs up or say aye to the approval of the minutes at this time.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none and seeing the emojis on the screen, we'll mark that as approved and continue on with the main agenda.
So I guess I'll start this first with, I guess, the good news that we are almost completely official. And so, as you know, one of the recommendations from the state water plan was to seek more permanent codification of the state water plan task force and its responsibilities and duties, and or potential responsibilities and duties that we see fit. And so I'm happy to report, of course, that passed both the House and Senate chamber, and I'm being told that it will be signed into law by the governor probably by the end of July. So here in the next couple of weeks, I've seen notifications of other legislation, kind of being signed here the last week or two. So it just, as it comes up, I guess, on the governor's desk, we're expecting him to sign that and put that into law. Part of what that does, a couple of things, as we'd intended, having it codified into law, now we can have a basis for seeking particular appropriations to support, staff time or other efforts for each agency's participation in the implementation of the state water plan or development of the next kind of ongoing continuing updates of the state water plan. And then also to perhaps get involved in other efforts that might include the state water plan task force. As we've talked about in a couple of the other meetings here, recent meetings, there was legislation that looked to have certain advisory committees, for example, on a Kankakee, watershed advisory group or something to that nature, that makes sense for perhaps the state water plan to be part of that effort or a subcommittee of our state water plan task force. Similarly, I know that the draft legislations for wetlands, streams and wetlands that remains out there in draft form, it calls specifically on the state water plan task force to be kind of an oversight and guidance for some of those matters. So that's just an example of where our formalized codification or recognition as a task force in the state of Illinois leads into other opportunities where the task force could probably serve best for the state of Illinois on how we move certain directives forward or advise. And in my mind, I see that being subsets of, of the task force, maybe special committees we might put together to do that. So again, I'll let everybody know, or Wes will let everybody know when that gets signed into law. But in the meantime, you can be thinking about, now that it is in law, how we might be able to secure funding resources for the next budget cycle when we're looking to be able to support the efforts that everybody on this call and others put into implementation of the state water plan. With that, I know, and we'll get into some of these either in the agenda or as we come up on the topics. I do know that the National Flood Insurance Program bill that was put forward, I believe we made you aware of that, also passed both the House and Senate. And again, likewise, we're expecting the governor to sign that into law here at the end of July, or by the end of July. What that basically does is, just like we have all the communities in the state of Illinois that participate in the National Flood Insurance have to have an ordinance upon which they use to regulate the floodplains in their community. The state of Illinois likewise is considered a community in the federal government's eyes and FEMA's eyes. And therefore we had to have our own ordinance, if you will, that governed state of Illinois activities by DNR or IDOT or CDB or DCEO or any of those kind of entities that would be doing any kind of work in the floodplain, and now would have to abide by the National Flood Insurance Program kind of standards. And so they expect that to be signed into law yet this month. And then we'll begin working on administrative rules that will go to more support how we actually carry out that directive. And we're expecting some folks to have comments on that as we move those rules forward. But we'll keep the State Water Plan Task Force certainly plugged in, or maybe looking to you for some guidance as that is developed as well. With that, Wes, I'll turn it back over to you to see if there was other things you wanted to cover under this particular section of the agenda.
No, Lauren, I was just opening it up. If anybody else had any legislative specific updates, I guess we can pause here just in case anybody has anything they wanted to share.
Hey Wes, it's Chris Davis from Illinois EPA. How you doing?
Good, Chris, go ahead.
Good. Okay. And this really isn't a legislative update, but I think it's an update that's appropriate for the plan. Director John Kim has put in his retirement paperwork and will be finished with the agency mid-July. James Jennings will be our acting director until we get a final director. So just that piece of information. So if there's anything that needs to be updated or that you had the director's name on, we need to go ahead and update those. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Very important information. So thanks for sharing for everybody on the call to know that. See, Steve, if you have something you want to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add another legislative bill, Bill 3046, dealing with water reuse, has also passed, and it will also be signed later this month.
That's a good one. I think that's another one that was on our recommendations list to see. Good to see that getting checked off the list. Guess I'll do a final call if anybody else has anything else they'd like to add.
Just a question for Steve. So can you clarify for the group, does that basically just then allow for water reuse in the state of Illinois, or take away restrictions? What did that bill do?
It does allow reuse now, and it'll be going to EPA for administrative rule.
All right, thanks, Steve. I'll pause a moment to see if anybody else has anything. Not seeing or hearing any, we'll move on to the agenda. And I think we're going to talk a little bit, get some feedback from the State Water Plan regarding the Water Use Act of 1983. This was a recommendation that was in the water sustainability section as something that we need to reevaluate. So, Lauren, did you want to kick off this topic of discussion?
Sure, I'm happy to start that. Thank you, Wes. And so, again, yeah, building from the recommendations in the state water plan, it was saying that there was a need to move from just monitoring of what happened with particularly groundwater withdrawals to getting into a little more governance and regulation of those. And so, given that recommendation, and really this last legislative cycle, we had the passage, and maybe I should have mentioned that, the passage of the Carbon Sequestration Act, which has the potential to have groundwater influences and aquifer influences as well. And as part of the development of that legislation that passed, we basically had an opening door open for us into the governor's office to deal with that. And as a result of that legislation, now Illinois DNR Water Resources does play a bit of a regulatory role now in any application for carbon sequestration actions that involve an impact on the groundwater and aquifers, really to be there to flag potential for impacts to others from the use of that water. So that is another maybe piece of key legislation that should be brought up as well. But from that, it really gave us an opportunity to talk with the governor's office about the recommendation in the state water plan that, hey, the bigger picture is that we need to take a second look at how we're dealing with this Water Use Act of 1983. And the way it's set up right now is really involves the soil and water conservation districts and names the Department of Agriculture really for monitoring and reporting activities for groundwater withdrawals. And so as we kind of cracked the seal on that legislation and went back into the act, and based on the recommendations in the state water plan, we're looking at kind of redoing or amending and updating that particular provisions of the Water Act of 83. Number one, to kind of reflect what's really going on. And so while there's reporting and that comes in, through like the soil and water conservation districts and into the state water survey, and then that gets put into the IWIP program there for monitoring, this proposal would go a little step further and begin to look at registering water withdrawals. And at this point, we're looking at registering all water withdrawals that would be more than 100,000 gallons per minute in the state of Illinois. And then if you are drawing more than 1 million gallons per day, I said minute, I think it's per day, right? More than 100,000 gallons per day needs to be registered, and more than 1 million gallons per day needs to have a permit from the state. That allows us to have impact assessments and really kind of like we have in floodplain management, where thou shalt not flood thy neighbor. This really stems more to a basic concept of thou shalt not use up, thy neighbor's water sources. And so we built off of that. We're proposing that and really proposing to house that within DNR at this point in collaboration with obviously the State Water Survey and the way that we continue to report that. But it is a bit of a restructuring from the Department of Ag. I'm not sure if Department of Ag is on this afternoon. We need to collaborate with Department of Ag and get them up to speed on what we're trying to do here and why. But it's really that focus to register and then be able to regulate to some extent water withdrawals, both surface and groundwater resources in the state of Illinois. Some of what timing wise goes along nicely with this is that the Joyce Foundation recently funded a study of groundwater and groundwater regulations in the Great Lakes Basin. And that report came out here about a month or so ago and was very telling that all the, I think at least 5 or 6 of the other Great Lakes states are already regulating their water resources in this manner by registering and regulating those kinds of withdrawal units. And Illinois kind of stood out as, hey, you're behind the game here. You're not really regulating and being able to have an impact to make sure others, particularly disadvantaged and smaller communities that don't have the wherewithal to watch out for themselves, to make sure that there aren't those kinds of surface water and groundwater impacts. So we are in the midst of doing an amendment to that act. Certainly we'll be willing to share more of that as it begins to develop. I'm going to stop there and see, Wes, if there's anything else that we needed to add in or if there's any questions. Thank you.
No, Laura, I think you covered most of it. I think a lot of this stemmed was the governor's office had an interest or concern, I guess I should say, that, you know, there could be large industry that could come in and put in a bigger, deeper straw into that groundwater and really impact neighboring domestic wells or, you know, whoever's existing users without really any recourse. The current Water Use Act just says that it should be studied and a recommendation would be provided, but really there's nothing there to limit or restrict that impact of a taking of someone else's water source or a negative impact on somebody else's water source. So that's why we would recommend this study be done at 1 MGD for, well, say the very large water users, whereas we just require a registration, that 0.1 MGD registration. And that registration will help us evaluate if they're meeting the water use or the IWIP requirement of reporting water annual use as they should be. So by having that registration, it ensures that we can follow up and show that they should be reporting their water use. So I do see that Brian from the Department of Ag is on there. I'm sure you have plenty that you may want to jump in and say here, but we'll kind of open up to everybody and I'll kind of give the first floor to Brian if he has any comments.
Yeah, I do. Part of the 83 groundwater use Act, there's a Title 8 under the Agricultural and Animals. I think it's Title 8, Chapter 1. I think there's a subchapter called Soil and Water Conservation. That's Part 675. Pretty much gives the soil and water, each 97 soil and water conservation district the authority over high capacity wells and the sign off of those. Definition of the high capacity well is just a well capable of producing more than 100,000 gallons of groundwater per day. And then there's some other definitions within that. I think it's like there's public water supply well, that definition, pumping water level, static water level, what a water table is, etc. So I know when there are triggers from the EPA for a high capacity well, they send those letters and notifications to us and we sign off on that and then ship it to the Soil and Water District. That well, the county that it's in, and the Soil and Water District really has the ultimate sign off authority per the 83 Water Use Act, in, I guess it would be in the section 675.10. And that's all I have when it comes to high capacity wells.
Yeah,
Brian, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, Brian. So right now, one of the concerns we had with this is that then you essentially have 97 different regulatory entities signing off on this, and there may not be a consistent practice or consistent decision-making within those 97 communities. And often what we're finding for large well withdrawals is that they can span across county lines. And there's a concern with that we particularly see in the deep aquifer up in the Northeast, and some other places where that jurisdiction between a county line isn't always, the best reference for when that should be utilized. And within that Water Use Act of '83, it calls on the state soil and water conservation districts to reach out to the to the State Water Survey for technical guidance and evaluation of these wells. And to our knowledge, that wasn't being done. So we're just kind of
And-
concerned if that has been really thoroughly investigated or not.
Well, and if you know the history about soil and water districts, there's a real high turnover of staff there. So part of that is just could have gone outside of the institutional knowledge and not passed down. But I do know with this, they were trying to keep those decisions based at the local level and the local need.
Yeah, we can understand that. As we've done water supply planning, we've found often that the locals see groundwater issues as a regional issue and not as much a local issue, such as like where we're seeing that the water withdrawals from Will County are greatly impacting Kendall County and vice versa. And again, you kind of make a good point, is that there's that concern of institutional knowledge there, and is that consistent enough to evaluate these impacts for multiple counties? And that was really our concern that we had. And also, as we looked at our neighboring states, we also saw that it wasn't really, this was not common practice among our neighboring states. And a lot of them kind of had a more consistent line with what we were looking at, is that this would be managed at a statewide or by a state agency.
Okay, so I just do know there were some counties that were exempt from this, which are the Lake McHenry, Cook, DuPage, Will, and Kane. So those counties are exempt from what we classify the soil and water district groundwater notification.
Okay, my reading of that, I didn't see where that was specifically spelled out.
So that's under section 675.2.
Okay. But those are the counties that are having the biggest problems. So, that's where we're seeing all the, McHenry's where we're seeing all the shallow water problems. Cook did until, and DuPage until they switched off of groundwater and went back to Lake Michigan. Will is obviously one of the biggest problem issues in the state. So again, I think this is just something that we need to discuss and discern if what we're doing now is working, or if it needs to be reevaluated. I think
Yeah, I
that's
think-
our concern.
I think parts of it probably needs to look at it, because if we're going to do something, I mean, this is already written in JCAR. So getting it amended is, I don't have to explain what getting amended things through JCAR is like.
Well, I think, Brian, why don't we plan to get with you and share our insights there further? That's been on our to-do list. We just wanted to introduce kind of the idea that we were looking at that piece of legislation and really at the governor's office prompting to go forward that direction. So obviously we need to collaborate with Department of Ag and intend to do that going forward. But at this point, wanted to use this particular meeting of everybody to introduce the concept and give a direction, or let folks know what was afoot there.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good, Lauren.
Any other comments on that effort? All right, well, we'll continue to keep you posted. Obviously, it involves, at least a couple of different agencies and State Water Survey as well. as we see what's best to move forward. And so we'll keep the task force advised as things develop. So I think we can move to the next topic, Wes.
Sure, Lauren, and this is where we typically just kind of go over the recommendation progress and everything based on our most recent submittals, seeing how we're coming on implementing the report and making sure that we're kind of holding up our end of the deal with publishing the State Water Plan Task Force. So just a quick update, we still have the 147 total recommendations. We're up to 61%, or I'm sorry, 61 started. And you can see these other statistics. I know these probably don't mean a whole lot to you until we compare with where we have been since we've started the report. So you can see that we're now up to 11.5% overall completion of the recommendations. And you know, not surprising, I think July is typically a slow reporting month, as we can see in last year as well. July was a slow reporting month, just with, I think, everybody being out on vacations and everything. But just a reminder that, you know, we are publishing these and wanting to show the public and also our legislator that we're going to be going to ask for funding in the future. Hey, if we need some funding, we want to show the work that we're doing to deserve that level of funding, that we are implementing this work, and they should be supporting our efforts as well. So again, just make sure you continue to provide those updates and make headway on those recommendations as well. So this is just a general overview. And as always, we'll kind of just quickly go through kind of the highlights reel if anything big has occurred in any of these topics. So starting off with water quality, any updates there, Jeff?
Yeah, I'll just make a couple of quick ones here. You know, I think last time I talked about with the 319 notice of funding going out, and we got a good number of proposals, and we're about to start, or we've been reviewing them and going to be having some discussions on them. So that's moving on forward. The integrated report, actually, I did not put that in the spreadsheet. The integrated report is out for public comment right now, showing what's the changes in the water quality, what's the status of the waters in the state. I know the surface water section has been going out and making doing a lot of work to continue monitoring the quality of the water and doing a lot more. They're using a lot more technology to better go through the review of the samples and the data as we get them, so that we'll have some better ways to review it. Generally, I think that's about all I've got to add for this one for this month, just to keep it quick.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Move on to climate change. I don't think I saw Dave in, or I did see Trent. If anybody has an update for climate change.
Yeah, hey Wes, it's Trent. I think Dave's in Michigan doing some field work, so I can give a couple of updates on the one of the recommendations for monitoring weather and climate extremes, working with the atmospheric science department here on campus for some federal support for kind of what we're envisioning as the Mesonet 2.0, with some really high quality monitoring of weather extremes. And so hopefully putting together some proposals for federal support there. And then with a recommendation related to a climate toolkit for future projection information made available right now in talks with Argonne and NOAA to support that kind of toolkit development or an adaptation to what Argonne already has to make it more I guess accessible for state stakeholders. And then the only other one I wanted to update was the sort of future, I don't know if there's an official name for it, but the future looking Bulletin 75 that Momchilo Marcus here at Water Survey is leading. That work is ongoing for projected design storm information. And so hopefully we'll have some good results for that, maybe later this year or very early next year. So that's what I have.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. I think we just got that agreement worked out that we should be seeing that revised Bulletin 75 coming out. Maybe, as you mentioned, I think it'll be due in December. So we'll expect some publication there and probably some discussions and maybe a presentation or two on that coming up in the future for those interested. With that, we'll move on. See, Lauren, do you have anything on the integrated water management side?
Well, I already mentioned the legislation, so check that one off essentially as a win, as a complete. A couple of others, I know the kind of the redevelopment of what we called the IMAG group for mitigation and so forth. I think discussions have also continued towards that end of beefing that up. Some of that's been driven by an opportunity to develop a state revolving loan fund through the Illinois Finance Authority for stormwater. And of course, there would need to be direction on what kind of mitigation would be advisable for that revolving fund. So work continues on that front from re-engaging a mitigation advisory group. On the Illinois, the IWIC, the Illinois Information Center. I guess maybe, I'm not sure if Glenn has any kind of an update. We probably need to collaborate a bit and see where we're at in terms of legislation for that, or having information in hand to support taking that into as a legislative proposal. And really the kind of the org chart and the right kind of information supporting that. I don't know, Glenn or anybody else, do you have any further updates on the Illinois Integrated Water Information Center?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. This is Glenn Heaston. Well, the only other updates I would include would be that we did have on May 6th, we had a conference at the iHotel in Champaign. It was combined with discussion about groundwater aquifers, but we had a presentation that I gave, and it was regarding, advocating for the IWIC legislation, or for the idea to move into legislation. We had a number of Illinois state legislators in the audience, and had some conversations with those folks and a handout. As I understand it, there was no new legislation introduced as far as the most recent bills that were approved within the last month or so. The U of I had been advocating for the IWIC legislation, but at this point, I'm not sure where that stands, and who may be continuing at the U of I to be advocating. But I'm expecting we will continue that process, especially now that the State Water Plan Task Force has been approved, and now we'll have there's a connection to the IWIC through that as well. And that's all I'm able to talk about at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having the one piece of legislation approved helps us springboard into the next for the IWIC, but we may just have to get together and see what we have for our information in order to, and then figure out how a game plan to move forward with that. So more to come on that. And I think that's all I had for integrated water management.
Thanks, Lauren. We'll move on to long-term funding. And Donna, are you on the line?
Hi, Wes. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Got you loud and clear.
Perfect. So the only update I would have on long-term funding is the State Revolving Fund recently concluded its fiscal year 2024, which ended June 30th of 2024, so last week. We are now into fiscal year 25, and because the new year just started, our intended use plan documents, which are available for both clean water and drinking water loan programs, are now going to be finalized in the next week or so. These intended use plans, or we refer to them as IUPs, they basically summarize all the projects that got ranked and scored to receive SRF funding. So that list is available on our IEPA website, and that list, like I said, will become final probably by next week. So essentially what it does is it talks about all the grant funding we have received from the federal government and how we're planning on using that funding to fund projects across Illinois. So funding includes regular drinking water, there's lead service line replacements, emerging contaminants is also part of the funding now. And then of course we have the wastewater side as well. So just wanted to update the group, be on the lookout for the intended use plans to be finalized next week. There are lots and lots of projects this year that have funding reserved until December 31st. So we're excited for the busy year ahead and looking to make a difference in the state. That's all I have.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for the update.
No problem.
Moving on to water sustainability, and Wade, do you have any updates?
Yes, Wes. Yeah, as far as the water sustainability, we work with state survey and have the statewide water supply and demand assessment data released, and this was published on State Water Survey website, which is called Illinois Water Budget Vista, and this is like a beta version, and it's open for public review and comment. We are also still working with State Water Survey water supply planning team to improve this website by resolving some issues like inconsistent data or some missing data. So this is for the sustainable water yield, the number 2, and also for recommendation number 3. So far, we have 5 out of 10 regions that have conducted planning activities. And we are now looking at Illinois bottom region, American bottom region, the Heartland Conservancy, which is a nonprofit institute, has expressed their interest in water supply planning for this region. So we will continue working with Heartland Conservancy to explore grant opportunity for this region, which is located in East St. Louis, which include East St. Louis area. Also, we have discussed the study of evaporation impact due to climate change with the State Water Survey, and we decided funding for this study will be included in next funding cycle, which will start next year. Also, I noticed that the number 7, improve water use accuracy with outreach and metering, that was assigned to State Water Survey under Ward Kelly's name. I believe Ward Kelly retired earlier this year, so maybe someone from Water Survey can fill in this task.
Wait, it's Laura Kiefer. Which task number was that?
That is number 7, underwater sustainability, which is improve water use accuracy with outreach and metering.
Okay, I'll check on that and we'll have a report next time.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Wes.
Wait, can you see my screen? Did I change it to the demand website? Can you see that?
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Okay, it's not liking it on my on my screen, so I want to make sure that's coming through. But it's kind of neat that you can come in here and check by sector, supply, source, and click on these different things, and effectively kind of look at county by county or and I apologize, by region. It's not working, not liking it a whole lot when I'm on this, but you can see the different regions that we have. And then if you zoom in even further, you can select a county to get this data by county as well. So pretty interesting stuff. If you want to check it out, I'm not sure if you could maybe throw that into the chat box in case anybody wants to look at that, but a pretty interesting tool. Hopefully something the public will use quite a bit of. So just a quick overview on that.
Hey,
With
Wes,
that,
this is Laura. I just wanted to make sure too, is just, we've had, I've been told we've already had some instances of people trying to use this data for local assessments. And that's not what it's meant for. So I want to make sure that that was articulated to this group too, because we want to try to nip that in the bud.
yeah, I think that's in the disclaimer whenever you jump on the website and you read it, that this is just a preliminary assessment using some broad assumptions, and anything done at, county or smaller should be reviewed with more detail. This isn't a design, I don't know an engineer that would take this data and try and utilize it to do any kind of planning or design. That's not the intent, and we have that in the kind of the disclaimer at the top, but a good reminder to everybody who's maybe taking a look at this. All right, with that, we'll move over to the Lake Michigan section. Tara, are you there? And do you have any updates?
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna actually toss it over to Meg to start us off with updates.
Thanks. Yes, Tara and I are tag teaming today, so thanks for having us. So here in Chicago for the Coastal Management Program, we've been very lucky to be eligible for a certain, amount of federal dollars through NOAA's Office of Coastal Management, and kind of being passed through from bipartisan infrastructure law funding for habitat restoration within coastal zones. So we have been, over the past several months, working to engage with a number of external partners to identify, projects that would be eligible for this funding, which is up to $6 million. We were successful in getting a project awarded in the last round, which was announced just a couple months ago. So there's that project was a hydrology study for Illinois Beach State Park. That's a multi-year study, which is really nice. So this is, if you've heard about that one, this is sort of a next round of that funding. So they're bigger, funding dollars than sort of our annual allocation. So it's pretty exciting. So we've been working to identify projects and partners to be eligible. We're able to submit up to 3 letters of intent this August that if, full proposals are invited, we would find out kind of later this year, and that funding would come through next year. So through that whole process, we have identified just a number of projects that are really exciting and could be, great for the coastal zone in Lake Michigan, and are planning to open. We have additional sources of funding aside from this just upcoming competition. So we're planning to open a notice of funding opportunity that would, kind of look at projects on a rolling basis, particularly for planning, engineering, and design, and maybe some kind of outreach and education projects too, to be able to pass through more of this federal money coming through into this region. So that's exciting. It's not, fully thought out or fully, sketched out yet, but we hope to have that NOFA open this fall, and we'll keep folks posted on the selection of projects to be submitted for this next round of funding through NOAA. We also have our annual allocation through NOAA, which we pass through on an annual basis of a fair amount of money. So we're getting ready to announce 16 grants for about $1.1 million that will start in August. So that's mostly public, but just kind of waiting on a few things to be signed on the line. And then those will be announced too, which is exciting. So those focus on coastal habitat restoration, planning, outreach, and engagement, and coastal resiliency as well. And then we'll get ready to do our annual kind of cycle for those in a couple months as well. So that's just kind of what we're doing with grants, which is kind of a lot, and also, like I said, pretty exciting. We are also sort of the one of the representatives of the state in the Army Corps Great Lakes Coastal Reserve. It's not just the Army Corps, but the Coastal Resilience Study, Great Lakes Coastal Resilience Study, being sort of led by Army Corps in partnership with the 8 Great Lakes states and tribes, and recently went through a shared visioning process and hosted a public meeting as part of that, which was great. And we're, Illinois was the only state that, was able to come and provide translation and interpretation services for Spanish and Polish language speakers, which was really kind of nice. And I'm going to just share in the chat the Coastal Resilience Study website, which has recordings of those public meetings. So over 500 people participated in, they did 9 meetings for states, plus 2 for tribes, and 1 for federal agencies. We continue to work on this. This is a multi-year effort. And right now, the next step is the Corps is conducting a basin-wide analysis of climate change scenarios. We have the opportunity to do 2 focused evaluations. We don't have sort of all of the information we need yet to select where and what we'll focus those evaluations on, but just know that that's an exciting opportunity for the state, and we'll continue to work with partners to prioritize where those will go. I know I'm going fast, and that's a lot. I'm going to just give one more quick one, then I'll pause for questions and turn over to Tara. We have also been working on a coastal resilience plan for the North Shore communities, so communities kind of above Chicago to the Wisconsin border. And as part of that, we are developing a data hub for coastal, for shoreline management resources. So this is called our iShore data hub. This is sort of in a soft launch. I am going to share the link here just so people can take a look at it, but just know that this is kind of in a soft launch right now. We have our shoreline management working group who we've presented this to, who's taken a look at this so far. So once this is more finalized, we will start doing some more presentations and make sure that partners know it's available for use and how to use it. But I'm going to just stop there. I know I talk really fast, so I'll take questions and or turn it over to Tara.
Anyone have any questions? Hearing none. Tara, did you have anything else you wanted to add in addition to that?
Sure, just a couple things. So one other thing that we're working on in the coastal program is we have our coastal non-point source program, which is focused on water quality issues. So that's something that we're required to do as part of our program. Our plan for that was approved in 2022. It was sort of a decade in the making. But now we're really jumping into implementation of that program. So we're looking at identifying priority areas that were discussed in the plan. I mean, it's an older plan, so we're really trying to figure out what currently is the priorities for the region that we really want to focus on in terms of like, is it like urban runoff, marinas pollution? There's a bunch of other things that the plan covers. So we're going to be kind of going through that, identifying projects for the next 1 to 2 years and doing a lot of outreach with some of our regional stakeholders to get a better sense of where the gaps are in the region that we can fill. That's something also that we might plan on bringing to this group as well. So kind of keep an eye out for that. And then also we have just been doing a lot of engagement this summer in terms of like coastal tourism and recreation. So DNR had a William Powers Nature Fest where we had a booth where we just kind of had a station for native seed balls to kind of really share about native plants and give people kind of a chance to bring some of that home and plant it in their own yards. And then we also been doing some work with, there's this group called the Inland Seas Education Association that sort of goes around the Great Lakes in these tall ship schooners and kind of teaches school groups about just Great Lakes issues. So that was something we participated in as well. We built a kind of small erosion tank kind of simulation. So it's a little tank that kind of helps teach about erosion and shoreline issues and shoreline protection. So I think that's that for us. And then I'm not sure if anyone from the from Russ's team is here to talk about Lake Michigan water allocation. Lauren, do you have a question?
Well, I can add in on that. That's what I was gonna do. So thank you, Megan and Tara. A couple more things that I would mention out of the state water plan. It talks about us expanding the staffing of the Lake Michigan's program, and so we are certainly making headway on that. Our coastal program continues to add to staff and capacity to do all the things that Megan and Tara were just explaining there. We've also added a permits engineer on the Lake Michigan's regulatory side and have a couple more positions focused there, some of which allow us to do a greater level of the outreach associated with Lake Michigan water allocation that's talked about in the recommendation in the state water plan. And so that has, we're starting with a survey of some of those communities. And so that effort is also underway. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I mentioned that the Carbon Sequestration Act, passed this legislative cycle. But one of the things that legislation included that's kind of exciting is that it created a new piggy bank in the state of Illinois, a water resources fund. And so, we've been lacking a special identified state fund for water resource matters. And this act created that new piggy bank. And so associated with that, that gives us opportunities, for example, with our existing permit application review fees that we collect now under law, we have a place to put that other than in the state boating fund that has, many different hands that can dip into that pot. So that's a great opportunity as we continue to develop programs and/or revenue sources that would be focused on water resource related matters. We have a fund now established at the state where we can put that. And to that end, I guess I would note that, in fact, following our meeting today, we're getting a group together. The governor's office has asked us to seek to develop legislation related to fees or collecting revenue associated with the use of Lake Michigan water that could turn around and be used in that region to improve the way we do and monitor and record and use Lake Michigan water. So that is another legislative initiative that's underway, really prompted by the governor's office to look at ways we might generate revenue from Lake Michigan water. I will say, and we will be telling the governor's office, showing them how we've been down this path a couple of times before to meet a dead end. And so we're going to go about it, see what we can do to perhaps more strategically go about convincing those that would oppose such a revenue generation of how that money could be used to come back to improve the region from a water supply, Lake Michigan perspective. And then the final note that I would make on Lake Michigan, I may have mentioned it at the last meeting, but we are continue to work with a couple of interests, particular one development interest in putting wind energy into Lake Michigan. And so I've shared that fact with the Great Lakes states through the governors and premiers regional body and the Great Lakes Commission, and really some of the other states, particularly New York and Ohio, have stepped up to offer, lessons learned that they've had from kind of going down a wind, offshore wind energy path. And so just an update for the group that remains an ongoing collaboration as we have a firm that's very interested in continuing to get into the weeds on what it would take to implement floating wind energy turbines in the Illinois portion of Lake Michigan. With that, I will stop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, Tara, and Meg. We'll continue on down our list. Unfortunately, Tara McFarland is not with us. She's out on vacation. Nothing too significant to report with flood damage mitigation. If you don't know, there is major river flooding on the Mississippi, essentially from at least the Rock Island all the way to the northern boundary. Actually extends quite a bit further south, and then we have moderate to minor flooding running all the way down to the southern tip. So just know that's occurring, and then we got more rain coming in tomorrow as the remnants of the hurricane pushes through. So anticipate some potential impacts as we continue to see that storm just now starting to crest and just barely dropping at the northernmost part of the state, and it'll continue to work its way down. Hopefully not having too many impacts on you all, but just note that is occurring, not as severe as last year's event, but still up at the major flooding stage. The next topic is aquatic and riparian habitat. Brian had to unfortunately step away for a personal obligation this afternoon, so he's not there, but he didn't have any significant updates. And that leads us into the water use laws and regulations. Moving over to Steve. Steve, do you have anything in addition to what was already previously discussed?
Yeah, kind of related to this. I think the funding they were talking about with regard to fees with Lake Michigan, with it's kind of driven with the water use fees. It gives us maybe a pathway to get fees for Lake Michigan water, and like Lauren said, it kind of creates a bucket for us to ensure that money that comes into OWR stays within OWR. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next, we'll move on to Brian McCoy with navigation. Brian, you have any updates?
Thanks, Wes. This is Brian. Yes, a little bit, mainly going to be ongoing efforts, continuing supporting some navigation recommendations. I like to just mention that we're continuing to move forward with our study that is providing resources. It's going to be rates and charges and resources and a directory for the ports and stakeholders, and that's under the Illinois Waterway Transportation Study. And hopefully that's going to gain some traction in the next couple of months, and we'll have more significant report on that later on our next meeting. Also, the statewide our research planning grants. We have several ongoing efforts for resiliency planning and supporting planning efforts for our port districts. We have an annual grant that award cycle that should be announced here pretty soon. It's slated for summer, and don't have anything to report on that yet. However, it is pending. So some additional grant funds are going to go out for planning efforts. Nothing else really to report. Maybe one parting note is working on the duplicates and for the Lake Michigan, taking over the our section for navigation section for the ports, upgrade ports and increase transportation. Navigation section is going to take over that one. Mine just
And
needs
Brian,
some different wording.
did you coordinate that with the Lake Michigan section just to make sure you were both in agreement on that?
Yeah, there was some initial comments from the last meeting, but when we parted with that it's mainly our lane.
Yeah, sounds great, Brian. Yeah, I appreciate you actually looking into that. It's the only response I got on the duplicates from our last meeting. So with that, unless Lake Michigan has any concerns, I'll just strike that recommendation from the Lake Michigan section and keep it in the navigation section. Is there any concerns with doing that from the Lake Michigan section? All right. I guess hearing none, I'll take that as no concerns. So with that, we will move on
Hey Wes,
to.
hey Wes, real quick, can I jump in real quick? This is BJ.
Sure.
There's a couple things that Brian's not privy to, but we just received a draft document from, it's actually through the, and I don't know if this group is familiar with the Mid-America Freight Coalition, which is 10 states. It's Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And we provide money to them to do different research projects. And they just gave us a report, and I'll share this with Brian and yourselves after this meeting. It is in draft form, but it's a study that primarily focuses on understanding and supporting port and terminal development across the Masto region waterways. And what this is really it's really a tool. It's a tool to identify and examine primary and potential freight markets within a 90-minute drive time buffer for the U.S. Corps of Engineers to find public ports and private terminals. So through the identification of the business and industries in the market proximity to ports, combined with a review of past development research and interviews with port and marine leadership, the project kind of lays out, at least potentially lays out, a strategic development approach in support of port growth. And so, again, this is kind of an interactive tool along with some past and future narrative freight development ideas for the region. And then, so that's coming out. So the other thing I just wanted to mention was that with the Great Lakes and Governors Premier, they have undertaking a electric, and Brian, maybe you can jump on this too, but you know, maybe, but it's a ferry electrification study. And so it's a very small, I think it was only like $15,000, but it's to look at potential opportunities for ferry electrification within the region of the Great Lakes and Governors and Premiers. So we've got actually a first meeting coming up on July 11th, which I believe is Thursday, and they're going to provide some of the information that they've developed so far. So anyway, I just want to let you know about those two activities as well.
Yeah, thank you, BJ and Brian.
That's all I got.
All right. All right. Sounds good. All right. We'll move on to erosion sedimentation. Brian Reneker, do you have any updates to provide?
Really, it's just a few legislative updates. And I'll just kind of hit on the soil and water district funds. Of course, they're the department's main tool for the deployment of sediment and erosion control conservation practices across the state. And their proposed funding for FY25 was reduced about 48%. So it's kind of got them in a little bit of a bind. So we're looking at some other state and federal opportunities for funding. As we know, there's like $1.7 trillion of IRA funds sitting out there. So we're working to partner with NRCS to try to get some of that funding back to them for the FY25 aspect of it. Also, during the spring legislative session, the department's fall covers for spring savings program was actually granted additional funding. So super happy to have additional money into that program with a really tight budget year. The department will be able to provide 150,000 acres to that when it opens up sometime the first part of December. That's kind of what I've got summed up for my sediment and erosion report.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any questions or comments? Not hearing any, we'll move on to data management with Laura. Laura, any updates?
No updates right now. We've been working on a proposal to roll out to different opportunities that come along. But the folks who've been working on that have been working on other recommendations like water supply, water sustainability, and the climate. So they've been busy there. So we're hoping to be able to return to this effort soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Laura. And lastly, I didn't see Michael from Recreation. Anybody here have any updates on Recreation? I didn't see anybody in the participants list. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to other things. First, old business. I just wanted to put this in here as a reminder. Last meeting, we had the discussion about removing duplicate recommendations and that we are getting inconsistent progress updates on some recommendations that were very close. So as Brian mentioned in Navigation Lake Michigan, sounds like they got one of those worked out, but we had a large variety of those that we're looking at maybe consolidating or clarifying to make those more independent. It was decided at the last meeting that the section leads would kind of work with each other on that. I sent out kind of the list of duplicates so that you all would know which ones those were, by our opinion, and either add clarification or determine to merge or remove one or the other. So just a recommendation to keep looking at that if you haven't had the chance, or revisit that if you have not. So that's the only thing that I wanted to kind of bring up and reiterate with the group. And then I'll kind of open it up if any members of the task force have anything else they want to bring up to the group as a whole under new business or concerns, comments. I'll take a moment to see if there's any comments from the task force members.
Wes, this is Laura Kiefer. I just have an announcement to make in that Kevin O'Brien has stepped down from being director of the Illinois State Water Survey. I am serving as interim director, and a national search will be launched shortly to find a new director for the Water Survey.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Again, I'll open it up to anybody who has any comments or anything they want to share with the task force members from a task force member. All right, not hearing any, we'll move over. If there's any members of the general public or non-task force members that have any comments or any questions they'd like to mention or pose to the group, now's the opportunity to do that. Okay, hearing none, we'll continue to press on. Next meeting is October 21st, as decided in past year that we would do one in-person meeting. We will kind of allow a hybrid, but would highly encourage everyone to attend in person. That will be here at IDNR down in Lake Level A. That will be October 21st, again, a Monday at 1:30. But again, we will have a virtual option available as well. And you can see those future meetings in January and April as well. So I guess I'll kind of open it to the group if there's any topics of discussion that they'd like to have in either the October or future meeting. Leave it open for discussion if anybody has any ideas.
Well, Wes, this is Lauren. One that I guess is still pending out there, as I mentioned, offshore wind energy develops. The company that's trying to move that effort forward may have an interest in giving a presentation to the State Water Plan Task Force. So we might be adding that to the agenda to get their perspective of what they want to do and how they think they can accomplish it. Over.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Lauren.
Hey, Wes, this is Chris. And I'm very remiss on keeping up with my legislation and reading things. So the formalization of the state water plan that's moving forward, it seemed like there was at least one complaint from an outside group feeling like they were being left out of the process. Is there a structure that's recommended through the new legislation of how everything fits together and how we create subcommittees and where we move forward on that, or is it kind of more up to our imaginations?
So, Chris, to kind of address that, in the language, if I recall correctly, going off memory, it does recommend the formation of these subcommittees for each of the topics that we have. So we have 13 topics now, and the way the public would participate, and we recommend that they participate, is by joining those subcommittees to provide feedback on what should be in the state water plan and also helping implement those recommendations. So while we have held membership to actual state agencies, those agencies were always meant to represent the public by having those key stakeholders as a part of each topic by form of joining that subcommittee. Does that kind of answer your question?
Sort of. It seems like we could have one subcommittee that has 4 people on it and another that wants 260 on it, kind of like the nutrient loss reduction strategy where there's bigger interests in certain areas and not so much in other areas. So I guess I'd be interested in hearing what our thoughts are on how we make sure we engage people bigger than the people that have shown up in the past. We need to definitely capture them, but we also need to go and find the people that we haven't hit yet. Not really hit them, but engage them. No hitting.
And maybe that's a great topic agenda for a future meeting on how we should be working as a committee and maybe giving an example or two of some of the committees that are doing well with that and how they're using their committee to implement these recommendations. So, so noted. I guess, Chris, would you be in favor of having that, add that to one of the agenda? Or are you just more proposing that should be in that level of detail? I don't believe is in the legislation as far as how we form those. Is there a recommendation to I don't know, step forward on that?
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe once the thing is formalized, maybe we have a topic or we have a discussion on what the legislation actually means to everybody, because different agencies are going to interpret things a little bit differently just because of we're coming from a little bit of a different direction. So maybe that's a starting point is, hey, now that this is final, where do we see moving going forward? And I'm being kind of selfish on this. The only way I accomplish something is if I inadvertently make it a requirement for me. So I'm kind of coming at this from a backdoor version where if we come up and say, hey, this is how the committees are needing to be established, documented, tracked, those kind of things, then hopefully the agency is going to do it. If we don't get given those details, it's going to slide off our plate.
Yeah, Chris, I think that once we're officially formalized, there was a number of things that we were going to probably discuss, such as, how do we reach a consensus? Is there a guidance document or some kind of guidance that we give ourselves for, voting? I mean, if you look at the participation list, it's heavily weighed on OWR, but that may not be in the best interest of the task force if we have just show up if you're a state agency who votes, and how do we determine what those the topics are. So I can see there's a need to provide some guidelines for our operations once we get formally organized.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, with that, I think I will turn back to Lauren for any closing comments.
Sure. Thanks, Wes, and thanks everybody for your participation today and your comments in each of your subject areas. I guess, again, press on. It sounds like there's a lot of things in the works, and so we'll continue that and certainly let everybody know when we officially are recognized in law with the signature of the governor. I guess the last thing that I would have for the whole group would be that if you're in your plans, include the Illinois State Fair. We are going to have water resources related tent and climate change tent together. There's a lot of great things coming together that involve many of the folks on this call today. So if you're not already planning to be there, put that on your calendar from, I think it's the August 8th through, what is that? Like the 5th, August 8th through the, I think the 11th, no, through the 18th, I think. If you're interested in volunteering for any of those efforts, showing stream tables or the water flooding table or any others, be sure to contact Wes or I or Megan McKinney, and we can certainly get you signed up. So again, thanks everybody for a great call today. Zach, I know you got things under control for the 5 inches of rain that Trent's going to send your way tomorrow. So good luck with that, and thanks everybody. Over.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.